Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Grajdek. I'm Dr. Martha Grajdek. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. Today, let's talk about gossip at the workplace. It's one of those things that seems to be inevitable. Some places are more filled with gossip, and it's a bigger part of the daily experience than in other places. But the reality is that most organizations, most workplaces have some kind of gossip as part of it. And while not everybody participates, of course, many people may be exposed to it against their own wishes and desires, not to mention the fact that gossip at work can be quite destructive. All of that and more makes workplace gossip an important topic of conversation. We can define gossip or think of gossip as a form of harassment or bullying. And while much gossiping is done in person, it's a verbal exchange, it can also be done via email or text or any other forms of communications that may be present at the workplace. Most people can identify gossip when they hear it or when they witness it. Oftentimes, it may entail talking about another person. That may be a coworker, that may be a boss. Sometimes it's talking about the company or an event, something that happened, or something that may be in the works, a project. Really, anything and anyone can be the subject of gossiping. From discussing somebody else's personal business to lying or repeating half-truths or plainly making up stories about something or someone. Gossip can come in many flavors. Gossip can involve spreading rumors or maybe sharing sensitive or private information, whether that's about a person, about the company, about a project, or about an event. A couple of things that distinguish gossip from just a regular conversation is often it focuses on the negative. Lies or half-truths are often involved. And the other thing that is easy to identify in terms of what gossip entails is that often it is done away from the person who is the topic of conversation. So gossipers don't want the person about whom they're gossiping to be within earshot, to hear what they're saying. So if you think about that one point alone, if information is being exchanged, whether that's half-truths, whether that's complete lies or speculations or things that are private or should be left private, if you don't want somebody else to hear you talking about it, you are more likely than not gossiping about them. There's a reason you don't want them to hear, because you might have to explain yourself, you might be confronted, or you might be shut down in your gossiping right there and then. When people gossip, when they engage in gossiping, for some, that may be considered to be the lowest form of trying to connect with other people. Why do people gossip? Some people may do it purposely as a vindictive or harmful type of behavior. Other people may gossip because they feel they have nothing else to contribute to a conversation, and showing up with gossip may get them included in a conversation or may get them the attention that they feel they may otherwise not receive. Whatever the reason, gossip tends to be harmful. It tends to be hurtful. It may hurt a reputation, it may hurt somebody's feelings, it may hurt a company. Even though the term positive gossip has been thrown around out there, the reality is that gossip is not really positive because it tends to be done away from a person that could potentially defend themselves against what is being said. So rather than calling something positive gossip, that kind of conversation, it's simply a conversation rather than gossip. Gossip in its truest form really is something that is negative and something that tends to be destructive regardless of its intentions. So while gossip may in fact bring people together on a social level with a social connection at the workplace, there are consequences, most likely to other people, that make that exchange a gossip situation. There are plenty of other ways of connecting with other individuals at work without having to stoop down to gossip about people or things, or even the company itself. And there's a big difference between having a conversation where speculation is part of that conversation. In such a conversation, there's no need for secrecy and going behind someone's back. Since the workplace conversation, specifically informal conversations at work, are a way of socially connecting with other people and a way of contributing and potentially even shaping the organization's culture, it's something that's real and not likely to ever go away. However, what we need to look out for is the negative part of the conversation, and that's where we turn from conversation to that realm of gossip. It's important to remember that gossip can be quite harmful to the organization and its employees. And I want to stress this point because so many people may engage in gossip not realizing just how potentially detrimental it can be to other people and to the organization as a whole. Gossip can lead to mistrust, disengagement, and tension within the workplace environment. Gossip can erode trust and morale. It can affect things such as productivity. It may increase absenteeism and turnover rates, and it can increase levels of stress and anxiety at the workplace. And this by no means is an all-inclusive list. From hurting feelings to ruining reputations, gossiping can be extremely harmful to the workplace and to the employees within that workplace. The organization has a tremendous responsibility when it comes to this topic of gossip at the workplace. First and foremost, it is critical that the organization and those in leadership and management positions create the kind of culture that promotes positive and open conversations and, along with that, transparency. The fewer secrets, the less secrecy, the less misinformation that is part of the workplace experience, the less likely people are going to engage in gossip, especially when it comes to projects and the organization itself. There's much to be said for formal policies within any organization. Knowing what is acceptable behavior and what will and will not be tolerated is critical. Not only is that important for individual employees to understand, but it's also equally important for those in leadership and management positions to lead by example. And of course, it's absolutely critical for companies to provide proper training on the topic of gossip. Individual employees will do well by learning how to disengage and not become pulled into the world of gossip. There are effective and healthy ways of doing it, but without having proper training, it may be that much more difficult for employees to separate themselves from gossip and groups of gossiping employees. This is where the organization has the responsibility to make sure that everybody at the organization, regardless of the level of responsibilities they hold, regardless of whether or not they are in management or non-management positions, everybody within that organization should have the ability to have some really good training on the topic of gossip and also on what are company policies regarding gossiping at the workplace. So as you can see, while gossip is part of the human experience and it will inevitably make its way into the workplace, there are ways in which we can decrease gossip at the workplace and mitigate its effects, because the reality is that gossip in its true form is a form of harassment and bullying, and it can be very detrimental. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. Workplace gossip is inevitable, and most people have either experienced it or at the very least witnessed it. Workplace gossip can be seen as a form of bullying and harassment, and it tends to be negative in nature. In other words, the phrase positive gossip is really a misnomer to a large degree. Positive conversations are just that, positive conversations, whereas gossip tends to focus on the negative, half-truths, lies, or storytelling that are intended to be harmful or hurtful, or sometimes intended to simply be attention seekers for the gossiper. Gossiping can affect things such as trust, engagement, and productivity. Gossiping can hurt feelings and destroy reputations. In other words, gossiping is not a good thing to have around. And while informal conversations at work are a way for people to connect on a social level, and also ways of contributing to and shaping the organization's culture, there's a very big difference between gossiping and positive conversations. Organizations have the responsibility and the opportunity of curtailing gossip by focusing on transparency and the kind of culture that promotes open communications. Formal policies and proper training can really help when we look at gossip at the workplace. And as is the case with so many other things, leading by example is critical. As the week unfolds, I encourage you to consider gossip as it may exist within your own place of work, whether you're an employee or a business owner, whether you are in a leadership position or a non-leadership position. Gossip most likely exists where you work. So it's an opportunity for you to consider how destructive gossip may be in your work environment and what can you do to not only reduce gossip in general, but also to help mitigate the negative effects of gossiping at work. And while the bulk of the responsibility may fall on the organization to come up with policies and formal trainings, individual employees have a personal responsibility in terms of how they conduct themselves, what they engage in, and what they refuse to engage in while at work. So at the end of the day, everybody has a responsibility to make sure you're not contributing to gossip and that you're shaping the workplace environment to be one that is positive and pleasant for everyone engaged. For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel, Stress Free with Dr. G, where you can find the video version of the podcast. And while you're there, check out some of the other videos. Most of them focus on a comprehensive approach to stress management. So make sure to visit Stress Free with Dr. G on YouTube. The link for that is in the description below. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.